Can a country survive economically if its citizens only work 4 days a week? Hello and welcome to another KuLAB. My name is Ku. This is our laboratory for learning. Thank you for joining us for another business news breakdown. Today we're going to take a look at a story in the Financial Times about the Netherlands and how their citizens are only working about 4 days a week. We're going to look at some of the pros, the cons, some English vocabulary, some business concepts. We're going to investigate this business idea and see whether or not a country can survive economically if its citizens only average working about 4 days a week. So let's go ahead and get started with our next KuLAB. As always, I like to start by giving accreditation to our author. So today we're going to be taking a look at Sarah O'Connor's. To the proponents of a 4-day week, there's almost no problem in modern life which the idea can't solve, or at least ameliorate. Burnout? Tick. Gender inequality? Tick. Unemployment? Tick. Carbon emissions? Tick. Conversely, opponents see only problems: reduced economic output, damaged business competitiveness, strained public services, a weakened work ethic. All right, let's take a look at those paragraphs, both the pro and the con. First, let's take a look at the word proponent. So a proponent of something is someone who's in favor of something, someone who thinks this is a good idea. In this case, a proponent would be someone who thinks a 4-day work week is a good idea. This paragraph is saying, to the proponents of a 4-day work week, there is no problem in which modern life the idea can't solve. They're suggesting the 4-day work week can solve a lot of problems with modern day life, or at least ameliorate. Ameliorate is a nice, fun vocabulary word that means to make something less bad. It means solve the problem a little bit, or to make it not as harmful. So if we ameliorate something, it means it's not as bad as it could be. So in this case, opponents think that 4-day work weeks can solve anything, or at least make it not as bad. And these things are burnout. Burnout in a business sense is when workers get very tired or overworked, a lot of overtime, and they quit their job or they're less productive. So burnout is when you just feel so tired you can't do it anymore and you don't want to work anymore. Gender inequality. In this case, gender inequality means the idea that in modern economics, many times women earn less than men for the same job, or they have fewer opportunities, such as becoming CEO or board members. So could a 4-day work week help solve or lessen the problem of gender inequality? Unemployment. Unemployment simply means you don't have a job or there's no jobs available. And finally, carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are things that are hurting the environment, involved in climate change. So it could reduce that, obviously, by people not having to drive to work, reducing the amount of days that businesses are open, so they're not producing as much carbon, and so it might reduce carbon emissions. Conversely, which is a good transition word, which means on the opposite side, you can often use the phrase on the other hand as well. Opponents see only problems. Reduced economic output. So in this case, opponents will say, we won't have as much productivity. We won't produce as many things if we don't work as many days. Damaged business competitiveness. So this idea means that a business who only works 4 days a week can't compete with a business that works 5 days a week, or whose workers are working 5 days a week. So you're not going to be able to compete with other businesses if you're not open. Strained public services. Strained in this case means to stretch them thin. They're overworked. So public services in this case are things that are offered to the public, and we're using them almost to their limit. Things like trains or public transportation, and a weakened work ethic. Weakened work ethic is about people not wanting to work more if they get used to only working 4 days a week. The working spirit might be crushed. But rather than argue over these predictions or nitpick over the results of trials in individual businesses, why not look to the country that has already gone a long way down this road without the rest of the world really noticing? This is a fun little paragraph. The word nitpick here means to be very specific about something. Nitpick is to point out very small details, as to really look at something very critically. So this author is saying, instead of nitpicking over these trials, oh, they didn't survey enough people, the survey wasn't long enough. Instead of doing that, why don't we look to a country that's already doing this and see what kind of solutions or see what's happening in that country? Gone a long way down this road. So when you go down a road or gone a long way down this road, it means you've already tried it for a long time, or you have gone a long way during the planning part of some sort of project. So instead of wondering what it might look like, we can see if someone's already tried it and tried it on a large scale. The Netherlands has the highest rate of part-time working in the OECD. Average working weekly hours for people aged 20 to 64 in their main job are just 32.1, the shortest in the EU, according to Eurostat. It also has become increasingly common for full-time workers to compress their hours into 4 days rather than spread them over 5. The 4-day work week has become very, very common. I do work 5 days, and sometimes I get scrutinized for working 5 days. All right, so in this case, the OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It is an organization that maps a lot of labor statistics over lots of countries. So according to this organization, the Netherlands has the highest rate of part-time working. The average number of hours is about 32. A normal 5-day work week is about 40 hours a week. It should be if you work 8 hours a day. Shout out to people in Japan and the United States who think 40 hours is part-time work. So roughly 8 hours fewer. Compress their hours into 4 days. So compress means to, put pressure on it and shrink it. So when you compress something, you push it very, very close together to make it smaller. So they're taking all of their hours, and instead of working 32 hours over 5 days, they're working 32 hours over 4 days, which makes sense. It's an 8-hour day. You get a whole extra day off. So our person here says that the 4-day work week has become very, very common. He says that he personally works 5 days, but sometimes gets scrutinized for working 5 days. So scrutinize is when people really look closely at what you're doing. To scrutinize something means to look very, very closely. It's close to the word nitpick. But in this case, it also means like he's also being told, hey, you don't need to work 5 days. Scrutinized kind of has like a negative connotation when you do something that is not normal. So scrutinized for working 5 days. It all started with women. The Netherlands had a traditional male breadwinner model until women started to join the labor force in part-time roles in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, leading to what many called a 1.5 earner model. The tax and benefit system incentivized this arrangement. Over time, as these working patterns became normalized, working part-time has become more popular with men too, especially when they have young children. Okay, so let's break down this paragraph. It all started with women. So this trend started when women started to enter the workforce in a large number in the 1980s. So this idea of breadwinner model. So in English, a breadwinner is the person who makes the money for the family. A long time ago, you might only have one breadwinner, one person with a job. Bread is a slang word, colloquial word for money, to earn that bread. Because usually you used your money to buy bread. And it was a traditional male breadwinner model, which means the husband or the male in the family would earn the money. Tax and benefit system incentivized. Incentivized is when you give some rewards for doing some behavior. People want to get those rewards, they will do the behavior. So a lot of times with taxes and benefits, if you set forth a benefit or you give someone a tax credit, they will do the behavior so that they can claim that money. So to incentivize something means to encourage that behavior using usually rewards. As these working patterns became normalized, so normalized means it starts to feel like normal behavior. Maybe if something wasn't very normal before, if a lot of people do it over a longer period of time, people start seeing this as normal. So in this case, women in the workplace wasn't very normal in the Netherlands. But in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, as nearly 30 years of women starting to enter the workplace, it became more normal. How can the experience of the Netherlands inform the debate in other countries? For a start, it suggests the predictions of economic self-harm are overdone. In spite of its shorter average working hours per person, the Netherlands is one of the richest economies in the EU in terms of GDP per head. That is because shorter working hours are combined with a relatively high productivity per hour and a high proportion of people in employment. 82% of working age people in the Netherlands were in employment at the end of 2024, according to OECD data, compared with 75% in the UK, 72% in the US, and 69% in France. So this paragraph is telling us the positive things that the Netherlands have seen, even if they're using a 4-day work week. The predictions of economic self-harm, in this case means what people said, the bad things they thought would happen, didn't actually happen. So a lot of those poor economic models, people said, oh, loss of productivity, can't be competitive. The Netherlands didn't see those things happen. In spite of, so in spite of is a phrase that usually means something positive happened even though there was a difficulty. It shows us contrast to something. We thought something were going to happen even though there was a difficulty, we still overcame it. Something good happened. So in spite of its shorter average working hours, the Netherlands was one of the richest economies in the EU in terms of GDP per head. So per head is per person. In this situation, head. So we might often say per capita as well. That means per person living in this area. Even though they had fewer working hours, they had one of the richest economies in the EU. Something we may not have expected. The reason this is happening is because they have high productivity per hour. So the people are working hard. And again, that might be an incentive. If you said to someone, if you work hard, you will only have to work 4 days a week. Someone might say, okay, I'll do that. So the productivity stayed about the same or went higher per hour because people were looking forward to that extra day off. High proportion of people in employment. So this is another big deal though. 82% of working age people in the Netherlands were in employment. So that's pretty high. That is a significant amount of people who are actually in the workforce. That said, it hasn't led to equality between the sexes. Although it is becoming more common for children to have a Papa Day when the father does the child care, rates of part-time working are still much higher for women. And although working part-time doesn't mean having to accept a low-paid or insecure job in the Netherlands, it does still appear to hold back women's careers. A report by the OECD in 2019 found that the Netherlands performs poorly in some dimensions of gender equality. Only 27% of managers were women, for example, one of the lowest rates in the OECD. So this paragraph is saying, listen, it sounds like a very good idea, but there are still some things that we need to think about. Maybe still some problems with the system. One of the problems is that so far, men haven't taken advantage of that part-time work as much as women. More men are working 4 days a week as compared to other countries, but not necessarily as compared to women in their own country. In this case, low-paid or insecure job means a job that you might lose very quickly, or temporary work, or work that does not pay really well. It says women don't have to suffer that. There's not a lot of that happening, but there doesn't seem to be as many opportunities to be a CEO or managers, for example. So only 27% of women were in managerial positions, which is one of the lowest rates in OECD. So this is one of those trade-offs where they're only working 4 hours a week, but maybe the life path, maybe the career arcs aren't there yet in terms of opportunities for women. The economy also suffers from labor shortages, especially in sectors such as teaching. This can lead to a vicious circle, whereby staff shortages make school hours more chaotic and unpredictable, which makes it harder for parents to commit to longer working schedules, even if they want to. Labor shortages are when there aren't enough people to work the jobs that are available. So there's too many jobs and there's not enough qualified people to work them. This one says one of them is teaching. So you have a lot of open teaching positions, but not enough teachers. This can lead to a vicious cycle. Vicious means mean. In this case, vicious means it just keeps happening over and over. You can't stop it. This vicious circle, staff shortages make schools hours more chaotic. Chaotic means there's no system. It's very crazy. There is no, you can't schedule it. You can't be precise. And just lots of weird things are happening. So this paragraph is saying there's not enough teachers. And so the schools have to change their school hours, which then makes it difficult for the parents who want to send their children to school. If the parents want to work more hours, they have difficulty with it because their schools are operating at weird, odd hours. But there are no easy answers when it comes to education and care. If everyone worked a 5-day week, there would be a requirement for many more child care and elderly care workers because fewer people would be available to care for their own families. So this paragraph is saying it's difficult because if we only work 4 days, maybe there's not enough teachers to teach in the schools. But if everyone worked 5 days, then we're going to need people to work in child care and elderly care. So it's one of those, it's difficult. You lose if you work 4 days and you lose if you work 5 days sometimes, or it feels that way. So there are still some issues to think about. The experience of the Netherlands suggests that a 4-day week isn't nirvana, but nor is it a fast-track ticket to economic ruin. The real lesson, I think, is that it's perfectly possible to arrange and distribute work in many different ways. It is just about the trade-offs you are willing to make, both within the economic realm and beyond it. Speaking of going beyond economics, one underplayed argument for the 4-day week is surely this: children in the Netherlands rank as the happiest in the rich world. So this paragraph is saying that there are both positives and negatives, and you have to be willing to live with some of those no matter what you do. A 4-day week isn't nirvana. Nirvana is a vocabulary word that means like bliss, like the perfect time, the perfect place. It means everything is perfect, everything is good. And it's saying it's not that. It's not going to make everything the best in the world. But nor is it a fast track to economic ruin. It's also saying that if you have 4-day work weeks, for some people, your country is not going to destroy itself. You will not end in economic collapse, as many people would say. So there are many different ways to think about work, and the 4-day work week is one of them. You just must be willing to make those sacrifices. She finally says at the end that one of the underplayed, so underplayed here means something we don't talk about as much, play in like the media or talk about. Under means not as often. So underplayed argument is surely this: children in the Netherlands rank as the happiest in the rich world. So if you value things like children's happiness, then a 4-day work week is quite important, because they seem to be the happiest in the entire rich world, which means those countries that have a very high economic standards. Very interesting idea about the pros and cons of the 4-day work week. Okay, thanks for joining us for that business news breakdown. A very interesting article about the economic impact of a 4-day work week as seen through the lens of the Netherlands. Fun article. Hope you learned a few things. If you did, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. We appreciate you joining us for these business news breakdowns, and hope to see you again for our next KuLAB.